One was the Hanover Township was doing in terms of their plan changes or amendments to their master plan.
Right.
And if you had noted anything in there that you think we should be concerned about,
Right.
discuss with them in any way. I think they were gonna have a public hearing on it, maybe they already had it by now. And then, go ahead on that issue, and then we'll talk about the other issue.
Right, my understanding is that as you're probably well aware, I know a little bit about the history of the zoning in Hanover. There's been a number of development projects across the border over the last several years. But they've amended their ordinances over the years, essentially at 20,000 feet in the air. Most of the properties on their site had been zoned for office, industrial flex space through the years, and a number of the properties just basically lost tenants. And I think Hanover basically looked at those properties and said, what can we do from a permitted use standpoint to basically make them more viable in the marketplace? And through a series of amendments, and this is in their master plan documentation, they've added uses, and the biggest thing was they added retail. And you see the results of that. And they continue to kind of tweak the ordinances with what kind of retail and whether drive-through is permitted and all those kinds of things. And that's also reflected in their master plan documentation. And as you well know, that most of the available properties on that side of the street have basically either been developed or have been approved, consistent with those zoning changes. The only thing that I would add is we as part of our master plan process looked at our side of the Hanover corridor, and I would say that we had the dilemma of the area basically from Martin Luther King to Ridgedale, where we looked every which way at what we could do to kind of stimulate development, and we basically have small lots in single family use, diverse ownership, and then lots that back up to it that you can't get the kind of depth to do any kind of comprehensive redevelopment, which is basically what they did across the street, because they had large assemblages of deep properties from Hanover Avenue, so they were able to basically do that. What I will say is that I think what we did as part of the Colgate redevelopment, which was to preserve the frontage for retail commercial use with residential in the rear, is kind of consistent what Hanover did, and consistent with what we as a board and what the governing body felt was an appropriate land use and redevelopment alternative for that portion, the Colgate portion of the frontage. And obviously you've got, I guess, Menon on the other side, and then you got it's the Mercedes-Benz, and then you have a couple of smaller sites, and then you hit the Morris Plains border. And going in the opposite direction on the other side of Ridgedale, in that direction towards 24, you have a number of, that's basically industrial properties, sort of heavy commercial properties, which have some issues. They're not that large, can't really do the same kind of comprehensive redevelopment that occurred in Hanover. So that's kind of what's happened historically. And Jim, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of whether you looked at the zoning or master plan.
Yeah, because my question was more specific.
Right.
It was, and more factual. What you're describing, what Hanover did, I think was approved quite some time ago.
Right.
We just recently received notice that they're amending certain details within their master plan.
Right.
My question was, does any of this affect anything that, in any of our neighboring